everybody. Now, the topic today is riots, chaos, civil disobedience, because right now, obviously, we've seen a lot going on in LA, Chicago, Denver, Atlanta, New York, even last night with the protests because of the protests against ICE, and the Trump raids. But in the UK, we've also seen outbreaks of violence for different reasons. In Belfast, there've been, or Ballymena, I think it is, there've been people burning cars and protests. These are basically centered around an anti-immigration issue. Today in Salford, Manchester, we had the burning of a car and some sort of, I wouldn't call it really rioting, but some reckless behavior, which seems to be rather driven by youth, frustrated, expressing themselves, doing whatever. So I think this has a lot to do with the fact that Uranus, which is about to leave Leo, is squaring up, Mars, which is about to leave Leo, is squaring up to Uranus in the final degrees of Taurus. So Mars in Leo is particularly hot-headed. Square it up to Uranus in Taurus, which is also quite a revolutionary placement. And we have unpredictable, volatile behavior, low impulse control, things getting out of hand, passions being inflamed. Plus, it's the full moon tonight, which kicks this off. I think this will run for about another week before, possibly things calm down. But I did want to discuss a few things about Los Angeles. Now, I saw a lot of people, like other astrologers as well, have to kind of jump on the bandwagon of Trump is an authoritarian. This is Trump abusing power. He's using the army against people, and they've jumped on that bandwagon because certain people love to play up the left versus right division all the time, and it happens on both sides, and they've always got to paint, oh, well, this is so bad, but the other side is perfect, and it's never a happy medium. It's never a balanced view. Now, I was watching last night the coverage. Now, Karen Bass, who is the Democrat mayor of LA, said specifically that the previous nights there had been law-abiding protesters who did not cause trouble, but elements of criminality came out after dark and were looting, causing trouble, doing graffiti, and causing damage, right? So there was a clear distinction between the peaceful protesters versus the violent looters, right? And then the congressman for the downtown LA area was saying very clearly that local businesses had suffered. There'd been huge losses running into the millions because of stores looted, graffiti, and criminal damage. And so when people saying, oh, well, Trump's cracking down with the army on the protesters by and large were peaceful, as they were in Denver, Chicago, Atlanta, where there were also protests. It was peaceful. But to avoid the criminality, it was announced by the mayor that there would be a curfew at 8 p.m. LA time. And then, under the auspices of the mayor and the local Democrat, authority, the police were out there with the horses in riot gear to disperse protesters who did disperse peacefully, right? So I think some people are overplaying it and saying, oh, making it a big thing about Trump and rioters and that. That is the clear picture that's coming from the Democrat side last night. So I really don't think this is Trump is going in and crushing these protesters kind of argument at all. But I have some more questions. How many people are really being deported? I thought they were going to first deport people who are already incarcerated for crimes because those would be low-hanging fruit and the easiest to deport. Why also would Trump start deportations in hotbeds of Democrat where you're undoubtedly going to get a lot of problems? Surely it would be easier to start in places like Texas where you have the support of a Republican, maybe governors or congressmen and that sort of thing in the various cities. So I find that a strange one. Why focus on LA? It could be to send a message, but on the other hand, you're bound to encounter loads of resistance, potential problems, and it can play into the Democrat and Antifa desire to spin this against Trump and to make political capital out of it. So I wonder why Trump is doing that. Now, apparently Trump coming in, Antifa were already raising loads and loads of money from their donors. Guess who? It's probably the normal suspects, i.e. the former Hungarian financier. We know who he is. And so this was foreseeable. on that left with Antifa, they've been gearing up for this so that they can lay on all these protests when the deportations happen. So it's a conflict waiting to happen. And I wonder if Trump is going hard in LA to create conflict, because we also know that Trump is so keen on contracts with Palantir. And Palantir create all this mass surveillance technology. They want the sort of digital ID where you have every bit of information about you all in one place, which is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. But if there are riots, which are fueled obviously by the Antifa side and then by anything that Trump does that's perceived as heavy-handed, you're going to have these clashes, and then they're going to sell the digital ID in terms of, well, we won't have all these illegal immigrants, we can monitor them better, and we can get rid of them more fairly if we have digital ID. And then in comes Palantir, which obviously is a CIA-seeded company rather than a like organic company, and everyone, it can get mega people plus the left maybe all on board with the digital ID. I think the left would be on board anyway because they seem to love authoritarianism, but it can also bring on board the mega people. So they may be trying to stoke a little bit of Aggie so that they can bring in with this Palantir. Now, the other very dangerous thing with the Palantir is they have a technology called lavender, which they've used in Gaza. And it's almost like a, what would you say? I wrote it down, but it's almost like creating a dossier. You know, in the old days, maybe MI5 would create a dossier on you if you were a dissident or a troublemaker. But now they can use this lavender to create dossiers on any form of person who may be, in the case of Palestine, perceived to be with Hamas, but you can expand that out because it could be used to create digital dossiers through AI on every member of society and determine how sort of problematic you are. And then they can use that to use AI to target these people, because a lot of this lavender technology is targeting people in Gaza on the basis of information accumulated by AI, no necessarily human oversight, and then it kind of just zaps people. So that's why digital ID, Palantir having access to every bit of your information and your internet browsing history all to boot, plus all your credit cards and what you're spending money on, can lead down a very, very dangerous path. Add to that, people looked at the whole pager thing and they thought, oh, that was clever. What a clever way to blow up Hamas. But how insidious was that? How incredibly nefarious was it that they'd anticipated the purchase of the pages, where the pages would be purchased, and able to put in these explosives with no real thought where the person would be when it exploded and the collateral damage. But think of the thinking behind that. Think of all the technology behind that. Think of all the information that had to come together to make that whole plan work. And then think how that can be used against, ordinary people who have legitimate concerns, but whose concerns are being criminalized under a certain climate politically, right? So those are some of the things. Now, apparently Blackwater has said that if they are given the contract to deport, they can deport 500,000 people a year, which is quite stunning. Can you imagine that? And can you imagine Blackwater doing it? So I think under the current regime, I don't think hardly any people are being really deported. And maybe it's going after the wrong kind of people, splitting families and that kind of thing. Now, Gavin Newsom came out with his normal nonsense, just party political stuff. But he was defeated in the courts, and the court said that Trump can put the National Guard in there, should it be necessary. So yeah, so I think a lot of the people who were protesting were actually the kind of people we get here with the Refugees Welcome, the kind of Unite, the unions, the usual suspects kind of people who are rolled out on all these sort of what I would call fake protests. So I'm not sure these protests were necessarily organic. I think they've probably been pre-prepared, but they were very small. They were, when I was watching last night in LA, it's very small. And in Chicago, generally, they're pretty small protests as well. When you think of 81 million people having voted for stronger borders versus some protesters, it wasn't really very, very big. So yeah. Oh, by the way, since we've had this Mars in Leo Square Uranus in Taurus, we also had the riots in France after PSG won, and people ran amok in the streets of Paris as well. So Mars, going into the end of Leo, a fire sign, quite hot-headed, squaring Uranus in Taurus, is creating quite a lot of razzing up of people, and they're getting a little bit tense. But I do think this will probably go off in the next few weeks.